I'm very happy to welcome you all here today for something to talk about, the daily check-in with the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And I want to let you know that if you aren't a member, you sure should consider. It's just $20 a year, and it supports a number of great programs here on the island. And we're going to be getting back together, I hope, pretty soon in person, in addition to these online meetings. So stay tuned for more information about that. Lisa Sheffer is with us today. She is Director of Marketing for the Bainbridge Island Parks Foundation. And as I said in the little introduction that she and I worked on, you probably do enjoy the parks and trails on Bainbridge Island. And one of the reasons that we have such a great park system, besides the Parks District, is the phalanx of people who are standing behind the park district to help make sure that they have the resources they need to grow and keep current. So Lisa, I'm really looking forward to you telling us about some of the programs that the Parks Foundation has been involved in and is involved in. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Reed, and thank you for all of you for inviting me to be here today. It's a real pleasure, and I'm glad we got the camera. I don't know.
Maybe we had a little challenge here with technology.
I have a 3-year-old, so I can call this is 3-year-old hair. Anyway, I've been with the Parks Foundation now about a couple of years, and we have some changes coming online. And I'm sure a lot of you during this COVID time have probably taken advantage of parks and trails that maybe you hadn't experienced in quite some time. So hopefully that's true. We were building on the campaign of now more than ever, our parks and trails were so important to us. And so
yes, we at one point we had the Surettes come and talk about their walks on Bainbridge.
Oh, great. Oh, they're great. I was just on a meeting with Dave. That's excellent.
With Dave, and they have a new version of that handbook out. So
perfect. Yeah, and you can get it at Eagle Harbor. That's great.
Yep.
I'm gonna see, Reed, should I try to do the presentation and see how it goes? Okay, yeah. It'll be real quick, and then we can jump into questions. So I'm going to quickly run through. Some of you may or may not know all the things that we do. This just gives you a little bit more foundation. So the Parks Foundation has kind of been in its entirety right now. I mean, it had to first kind of go at it in the late 90s, early 2000. In the last 6 years has really gained some traction in partnership with the Park District. So we work, as Reed mentioned, really hand in glove with the Park District to amplify the voice of the Park District. We're a separate nonprofit, completely separate organization. So kind of where tax dollars stop is where we can kind of come in and do enhancements to different things. And I'm going to run through that. Let's see. So right now we have, this kind of gives you kind of a visual of the different parks that we have. I'm going to show this in the slideshow, sorry. There we go. That's probably better now, isn't it? So our parks today, we have 39 parks throughout the island, some really, really large, from Fay Bainbridge to Fort Ward to really small parks. There's a newest one right on Cave. It's not actually listed on here, but it's the newest one right really close to the ferry. So if you haven't been by, it's kind of a tiny
right along Ferncliff Avenue.
Yeah, Ferncliff, thank you. So there's many parks, pretty much anywhere you live, you'll probably have access at least to a park or a trail. So that's great to know. And then one of the, just to kind of give you context, one of a park or preserve that you might have experienced is the Moritani Preserve that's in Winslow, just right off of Grow. So if you haven't taken advantage of that, that's a really great place if you have time for a quick walk and you're in downtown. It's a quick walk from the senior center, so you could kind of do a loop and have your lunch there. So we worked really closely with the Fletcher Foundation, the Park District, and the Parks Foundation, really kind of a three-prong group that used to be kind of a couple of developments on that site. The Fletcher Foundation came in, purchased the land, and really cleaned up that property and has turned it over now to the Park District. There's a Friends of group, Friends of Moritani, that help manage that location, and a lot of restoration has taken part because of the Friends group. So that's been an excellent addition to the Park District's amenities. And
so
then,
is that unique, or are there other neighborhoods or friends groups that kind of adopt
That's a great
parks?
question. So we do have kind of, I would say that's the more formal version of our friends group, where it's really set up with the park district. The Friends of Fletcher Bay, that was their requirement in order to hand off to the park district. They wanted a friends group set up. We do kind of have informal friends group, like at Blakely Harbor and Williams Olson, and kind of leading efforts in different ways. And so, but they're not as formal as the Friends of Moritani. But clearly, we work really closely with the different neighborhood groups to get whatever they want to see happen in their parks. And so these are just kind of some of the, you might have been there, the old farm equipment. These are the old apple trees. So can you see that one?
Yeah.
Mary? Okay, perfect. So this is one of our restoration. So if you've, I can't see everyone's hand, but I guess maybe Reed, you can give a show of hands of how many people have actually been to Moritani. Kind of maybe all of you or most of you?
Yeah, everybody who has their camera on seems to have
Perfect.
waited.
Okay. So you should know some of the new things coming to Moritani that will be a part of our pollinator circles. So if you happen to be down there in the next couple of months, you might see some construction crews and wonder what's going on. They're actually going to be taking out some of the field and actually replanting them with some pollinator, some wildflowers basically, and create these pollinator circles. And then eventually, then we're doing some understory. The forest is healthy, but it actually needs more diversity. So we'll be doing some more plantings, hiring Earth Corps, so they'll be there and helping out just to kind of make sure that the forest continues to stay healthy. And then there has been some discussion about what might happen where the old orchard is, but that's still to be determined. But definitely, if you happen to be there in the spring, check out the new pollinator circles. That'll be fun. And then hopefully we'll be able to come back together. We always do a Labor Day picnic, and that's free to the community. We have music and food, and it's just a fun way. We haven't been able to do that, or we weren't able to do it last year, but hopefully this coming fall will be different. We also, as you probably know, at Rotary Park, there's Owens Playground, which was the first all ages, all abilities accessible playground. It was a dedication to a little boy named Owen. He had a disability. He passed away. His parents wanted to do something in his memory, so they created a playground right next to that. So we've taken a lot of things that we learned from that, and we are now in the development. And if you haven't been to Battle Point Park in a while, this is a great time to go. There's not only is there pickleball that has opened, and probably some of you play pickleball, but you might notice next to that is Battle Point, or is the Kids Up Playground. The old playground was what we call love to pieces, literally, and it was made out of wood, and in the Northwest climate, that was only going to last for so long. So it had 20 years of good life, good playing, but we're now introducing an all-inclusive playground, so kids.
I find that absolutely shocking. It ages me to think that was only 20, or that was a full 20 years ago.
And we have a great video of people building the playground. It was just remarkable what the people. I don't know how many of you were on the island, but if any of you participated, but you might remember it was one of the things when we went out to survey the community. It was the one thing that really people held on to is a week-long community build of this playground. Times have changed. There was a little, there's not as much liability issues as there are today. So that's not necessarily the community build in 20 years ago isn't necessarily taking the same shape, but
yes,
we hope
30 years ago there was a community build to help put together the activity room, now demolished, at the senior center, I think.
Oh, really?
And,
wow.
And you sure couldn't do that anymore.
You couldn't do, yeah. So there's a lot of things, but I do think our new Kids Up Playground, we call it Kids Can't Wait to Play. I mean, that has been completely true this last year. We if you're out there this week, and hopefully the weather will hold for the park district, they are actually building the iconic ferry. So what kids will actually experience in all ages. So if you're in a wheelchair or you're a grandparent that maybe you're not super stable on your feet, you'll be able to participate with your grandchildren or your children, and maybe you have a temporary disability and you're on crutches for a little bit, but you want to still be able to participate. So there'll be a trike track, and the towers that you probably remember are still there. They were renovated. Those were very iconic. Those will allow kids to ride right onto from their trike track or walk, get right onto a ferry, and then go down below in the ferry, and then actually load on like they were an actual car, or and ride right on. And so it'll be fun. There'll be a sound garden. There's a we go round, and kids that are on wheelchairs will be able to roll right up and be able to participate. So I mentioned earlier I have a 3-year-old. I just think it's so important for kids. My child doesn't have a disability, but I personally think it's important for kids to be around all different ages and all different abilities. And I'm sure you all feel the same way. I think it's just, it helps with development, and kids that even have non-visible development. So at Owens Playground, if you happen to have sensory issues or you just need a little bit more quiet space, there will be those kind of hideout areas where kids can kind of just have that quiet time that they need. If sensory issues.
Lisa, is Owens over at Rotary?
It is, yeah. It's the one right next door to Rotary Park. Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, so it'll be similar. The Kids Up Playground will be a lot bigger. I mean, it's a regional playground. I know when I was there before they tore this one down, people were coming in from Bremerton. You were meeting people from all over the region. So it's definitely brings, people together from all over. So it's a little larger in that way. And then having the connection with pickleball, people could be playing pickleball, have their kids, depending on how old they are. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking out what's going on. And we have some art that's going on. We've renovated some of the art and repurposed the art that will be placed again. So just to kind of like play homage to the former playground, and still we actually need to we're learning. We know new things now. 25 years later, we know a little bit different what will work, what won't. So check that out. And then you might also know that we provide community grants. These are more capital improvement grants. So instead of because of COVID, we actually put that on hold, and we took our community grant program and we actually gave $10,000 as a match to Olson. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the Williams Olson, right on Madison. Oh, I should remember.
Ted Olson.
Will you help me out here? Well, it'll come to me. Basically, we were able to help the land trust save some land that would have been developed into housing or probably housing. So we were able to hold on to that.
The Ted Olson Park.
Ted Olson, thank you. My brain. The Ted Olson.
Yeah, up. And this is up sort of by Wilkes School.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. So we basically contributed to that, worked with the neighborhood, worked with the land trust, and were able to contribute to that fund. Instead of giving out community grants last year, that's how we contributed in that way. And then we also work a lot with restoration and stewardship. So I mentioned Blakely Harbor. We do kind of MLK Day of Service, but we're out there throughout the year. We'll work with the Park District to hire Earth Corps folks. We also support the Summer Trails crew and also a Conservation Corps. So the Conservation Corps are younger students, kind of more in high school, that are kind of learning about restoration and stewardship. And then the Summer Trails crew are actually out there building trails. So they started in June last year. Then with COVID, they were supposed to end in August. We ended up continuing to extend and extend and extend. And they went into like almost close to Christmas. And so it really wasn't technically the Summer Trails crew, but if you haven't been out to Sakai, which is right across from the Aquatic Center, there's some new trails in there that I highly recommend checking out. There's a pond that you wouldn't even know about. And the eventual goal is to take the Sound to Olympics, which is right off of 305, and to be able to connect that with the Sakai trails. So then that will continue on through Copper Top. Now the Sound to Olympics is pretty unique. It starts right there at the ferry and runs up 305 with the eventual goal. It's part of a rails to trails system that it will eventually connect over to Port Townsend. So we happen to be sitting in this wonderful place on Bainbridge Island to be connected to a rails to trail that will eventually connect over to Port Townsend eventually down the road. So, but it's great to be a part of that. And that's another place, if you haven't been to lately, with Sound to Olympics, we are creating what we call a linear park. And we've done a lot of restoration around the John Nelson Trail, which is another loop. If you're on the Sound to Olympics Trail, you will see the John Nelson Trail. And that's a lovely little loop walk that takes you over to the Vineyard Lane and then back around to Sound to Olympics. And we've been
so there's now a little walkway off of the Sound to Olympics Trail.
It's a really great,
and you uncovered a huge tree that had been covered up in blackberries,
ivy and blackberries. And so they didn't know what was there when they start kind of tackling the blackberry and ivy. They found this huge root ball. So it's amazing if you haven't been there. And then we worked with Odyssey Middle School, and they've been helping us for the last 3 Fridays doing restoration work and planting. So they're learning about restoration, getting out to be on Fridays with their friends, all masked up, but it's kind of gives them a little outlet too. So it's a win-win for us. And then this is where I always go, Ted Olson, Williams Olson, completely different parks. So Williams Olson was a family, William Olson family, the dedication to that family. There's a small little pocket park there. They actually also have a pickleball court if you haven't been up there. So this is a couple of pictures kind of highlighting playing pickleball and the beautiful views. And then this is one of the questions, Reed, you had about the Friends of groups. This is what I would say, it's not a formal Friends of group, but definitely have worked together to kind of raise awareness of Williams Olson and bring more funds into the area and really restore it.
So there's parking there? I've never been.
There's about maybe 4 spaces, pretty small. And then you can park on the street as well.
So it's all the way down Williams Lane, which is across the street from Cura.
That's right.
You wouldn't normally probably just go down that road without knowing that there was something at the end. A little bit like Holly Cove.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. It's a small little kind of surprise and delight of a park. And so I highly recommend checking that out. And then this is a couple more places where, working with the community, fundraising and bringing awareness, doing some restoration work. These are SCOCO, these are Student Conservation Corps groups. So, in turn, these students are actually getting some really great technical or some skills. And we did a Where Are You Now piece on Student Conservation Corps, and it was pretty remarkable how many learned this in high school and actually transferred this into their college degree and decided they wanted to go into environmental studies from the work that they received through the Park District, funded through the Parks Foundation. So that was kind of a nice testament to this project. And then this is kind of in its glory. And then the last thing, I have 2 more things I wanted to share. So we have a trails campaign. Well, as you know, I'm sure a lot of you have taken advantage of the 42 miles of trails that we have on the island. And this was one, the city required an easement from probably on Sportsman Road, there's those large homes. So right behind that, there's a trail that connects Rotary Park, and it connects over to Sportsman, which eventually will connect with down to Hidden Valley, which is right across from Sportsman. There's a little dirt path and there's some homes down there. And that Hidden Valley will connect with Gasm Lake. So it'll be a nice kind of cross section of trails. So one of the things that we're excited about is this Trails Connects campaign that we'll launch in the spring. And it'll be a 3-year campaign that's really about the connections. You can have all these different pieces of trails, but if you can just add these connections, these maybe a half mile, maybe a quarter of a mile, you can really extend these trails dramatically. So that's what we're working on, and we'll be launching that along with our partners and supporters, and then doing a variety of different ways, just getting out the message. And so one of the asks, and maybe a lot of you are into walking and trail connections, is looking for neighborhood walking ambassadors that can kind of be out, learn a little bit more about the trails campaign and the Connect Trails, and then be out kind of spokespeople for that. So I'm happy to share information with Reed as that becomes available if you're interested. And then this kind of gives you a visual. It's not super probably great on the screen. There's a lot going on. We did receive funding through the city through the LTAC funds. We'll be updating with the Park District the map, the Park District trail map. So when those become available, I'll make sure that Reed has those in hand. So as you open your doors, you'll have those to be able to pick up, be able to go out and explore. Our goal within the next 3 years is to grow our trail network from 42 miles to 50 miles. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot of back end stuff. It's not just building trails, it's the easements, it's the lawyers, it's the permits, it's the what we'll do a lot of times as kind of being a small organization is we'll buy the easement because it's faster for us to buy it than the Park District, and then we in turn then pass it on to the Park District. So that's been a really successful partnership for us to buy it, purchase it, and then hand it back over for the Park District to.
And do you work with the land trust as well in any of these projects?
We do, yeah. Like Meigs Park is a great example where it's on land trust land. So we'll be working with them to perhaps create a boardwalk. A lot of land trust is, not accessible. It's really about conservation. But for, like the Ted Olson was a great example of working with them. And then these other places where they have allowed access for people, then working with them and the Park District to make sure that it stays in line with what the land trust wants. And that's usually more passive use and not equestrian, not mountain bike riding, just for people walking.
Right, but making sure that wetlands are protected. And that
exactly, yeah. And Meigs Park is a great example. So if you happen to have been on Meigs Park, you're just doing that walkway right along 305, it gets a little bit muddy and kind of sloppy. And the eventual goal is to actually have boardwalks. But that takes a little bit of time and obviously funding. And it's working with them on the wetlands permits and that kind of thing. And then I think my last slide I wanted to share is something interesting that you might all be interested in participating. So for the last Sundays in March, we've been hosting alongside our partners, our forest and the climate crisis. So basically, how do we make sure, so the Park District has 1,500 acres of parks, trails, and open space. So they're one of the largest owners of land on the island. So how do we make sure that, as we can move into, and we already are obviously in it, a climate crisis or climate change is happening all around us, how do our forests adapt? How do we create more resilient forests? And so there's been different sessions. So the next one this Sunday is called Cultural Connections and Finding Inspiration in the Forest Resources and Stories and Art. And then the last session, and I'll send the links out to these, is Stewarding Our Land. So Conversations for Citizen Stewards. So we've had other ones such as kind of the overview of what's happening kind of in general in the on our Western Washington forest. And then this last yesterday, we had Stewarding Your Land conversation. It was mainly for designed for forest owners. So how do you, some of you might have these large swaths of land, and how do you make sure that what you're doing is the right thing, and how do we support you in doing that? So that is what I have. And I'm gonna close up so I can actually see folks. I will stop presenting and then answer any questions that you might have, or if I didn't answer, or what you thought this conversation was going to be. If I can answer any questions that you thought I was going to talk about, I'm happy to.
So you can either just unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type something in the chat.
The other thing I was going to mention, and I'll send this to Reed, is a couple of years back, some of you might know Douglas Christ. He's on our team. He's our communications manager. He used to be the editor for the Bainbridge Island Review. he did a really great write-up of 12 and 12. So we kind of did a call out for 12 parks in 12 weeks. And so he did kind of the history of these different parks and trails. So it might be something to just, as you kind of mapping out like your next, what you like to do in the next couple of weeks, to check that out. Gasm's on there. We also have Newt's Pond, which is kind of this little hidden delight that you might want to check out. And I'll send that off over to Reed as well.
So is that on your website, the 12 on 12?
That's on our, it's kind of tucked away because it was part of a campaign. So we've kind of hidden it. But I'll make sure I think we need to kind of give it a little bit more exposure.
Okay. Barbara was asking if you've worked with the Suquamish tribe.
We have. I have a desire to really step up our inclusion and diversity and equity and accessibility. I mean, we're doing, obviously, that I mentioned that in the about kids at playground, but quite frankly, I think that we can do a lot better. And I think that we can bring this is their land, and really bring into the conversation. And while I think it's important for us to identify, before a meeting, what land, we're on, but I do think that the processes, as far as how we can do a better job of incorporating the Suquamish tribe into the things that we're doing, and having them actually take the lead on a lot of things, and let us, step away from the table and figure that out, and just have a place at the table. That is definitely in the direction. And I should mention, this is probably be a good time, is that we're really fortunate to have had in the last 6 years, Barb Trafton, some of you might know. She has decided she's stepping down as the executive director into a project director role. So she'll be still on board and working with the Parks Foundation. We're very fortunate to have Mary Meyer, who will be joining us. She's from Islandwood and been within the community for the last 6 years, and she will be joining us as the new executive director. So I feel like, within that, and different changes, and obviously just conversations and opportunities of working with different folks. So Suquamish tribe will probably be on the top of the list of how do we incorporate into the conversation more of the tribal community. I am all for more people at the table and diversifying.
Robert, you have a question, comment?
That was a great segue, because my main question is, how can I be directly involved with your group to work on all this? I feel like I've been on just about every single trail on the whole island, and I know Barbara pretty well and everything. And full disclosure, I am on the Sustainable Transportation Task Force. I think, Lisa, you inadvertently called that thing Hidden Valley, the connection between the town and Gasm Lake. And
did I mess that up?
It's actually Lost Valley, but that's
Lost Valley. Thank you. Maybe I'm thinking of that. Yeah, sorry.
The reason I particularly want to be on your committee that designs these trails and connect, I'm particularly involved on the sustainable transportation, on the idea of connectivity. And what my concern is that all of these, it seems to me there's at least 4 main groups: the Parks and Recreation, the Land Trust, the Parks Foundation, and the city, that all have different control of the different trails on the island. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're talking to each other. And to be honest, I have a feeling I may, throw out things that are elephants in the room, and I'm sorry if I do that, but I am concerned that there's, trails serve different functions. For example, there's trails for walkers, there's trails for bikers, there's trails for mountain bikers, there's trails for racer bikers, and they don't always overlap. And we tend to, and we're trying to create this overall system of connected trails, and we have to acknowledge the fact that certain things, that there are sort of conflicting interests.
I think you're right, and I think some of you probably already know that the most recent is with the mountain bike riding and Grand Forest North, and wanting to have a part of that, not the whole thing, but a part of that to be set for kind of skill riding for younger riders. And so Grand Forest North it's not connected to the current Grand Forest. It's completely separate, but yet we still need to make sure that it's safe, and I completely agree with you as far as, people that are walking there, and does someone want to have a mountain bike rider right next to them? And so how do we have conversations about that? And so because that's managed by the Park District, Land Trust has their own views, and we don't set policy. we kind of follow along with what the park district want. We can advocate for certain things, and definitely on behalf of the community that comes to us and wants different things. But at the end of the day, we need to, we work really closely with the park district. So I would definitely, I think more people at the table having these conversations. If it's about community and enhancing community through recreation, and people define recreation very, very, you know, it's an independent, individual sense of recreation and what works for them. So, but we also need it to be safe, and I think it can be done. I think some places just might be just set for people walking, and it's like, okay, this is for people mountain bike riding, and how do we do that? And
then there are places like the Sound to Olympics Trail, which might be wide enough and set up enough that you could have a couple different uses.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess, you know, that's interesting, Ree, because, you know, you have Sound Olympics, and I mentioned Sakai, and kind of to Robert's point, if you want then to eventually connect with Sakai, then you're bringing in a whole other layer to what type of user would be on Sakai versus someone coming off of STO. And so, and I'm about just like, let's just talk about, let's bring this together. Yeah, it's going to be kind of sticky, but the more we can talk about these things, not everyone's going to get everything they want, but how can we actually work together so that we can get most of what we want?
Thank you so much for
Thank
taking the
you.
time.
Thank you so much.